It is certainly a challenging time for the US-Canadian relationship, but there's still business to be done, and there are still amazing founders, LGBT founders, queer founders that are finding a way in this time to still build amazing companies and grow.
Welcome to Living Out So Fabulously, where financial freedom means betting on yourself, building security, and redefining success to you. Maddie Morris is a Canadian trade commissioner who knows her way around both global markets and personal money lessons. From losing nearly all her savings in the 2008 crash to later turning bets on companies like NVIDIA and Rocket Lab into life-changing wins, Maddie has lived the highs and the lows of investing. Maddie brings honesty, resilience, and global perspective to financial freedom and what it really means. Welcome to the show, Maddie.
Well, thank you both.
We're so happy to have you here, especially with what is unfolding in the world today around trade. So let's start off by saying that first, you're a U.S. citizen, but you are also the Trade Commissioner for Canada. For those of our listeners who are unfamiliar with what a Trade Commissioner does or what they are, maybe you can share with us what you do and what is a typical day or week in your life like.
Wonderful. Yeah. So, I work at the Canadian Consulate here in Los Angeles as a part of my day job. I'm specifically the Trade Commissioner of Innovation. Most consulates and embassies in the United States representing foreign governments, their staff is about half and half the host country and half the country that the consulate or embassy is representing. I'm one of those American locally engaged staff members. My specific role is supporting with international trade relations between Canada and the Southwest United States. I do that specifically on the innovation file, which means I support with venture capital is kind of one of my big buckets of responsibility, helping companies raise and grow and scale in this crazy VC environment that we have going on here in California. And then as a part of that, I run a couple of startup accelerators, one focused on supporting Canadian space tech companies, and another one supporting on BIPOC founders, helping them grow and scale, seed stage onward through private equity.
Awesome. So you're VC in Silicon Valley dealing with current trade initiatives by the current administration with Canada. That's just a lot of chaos right there.
Well, it has been another dynamic year in terms of international trade. Certainly as a transgender woman representing Canadian interests in the U.S., living in Los Angeles, California, it has been a particularly interesting year for me. But I think through that, it's been a real opportunity to kind of, learn and grow with the current environment and to kind of really focus in on supporting founders, supporting companies, navigating through this super challenging time for them. It is a year unlike any other in terms of the Canada-U.S. relationship. But we have seen, a ton of interest from U.S. capital looking to diversify into other markets, looking to make capital investments into Canadian companies. I think, my Black Tech Startup Accelerator, we had 4 times the number of applicants from Canadian startups looking to raise capital from here in the Southwest U.S. market than any of the 4 previous cohorts. And so, there are big picture conversations going on. It is certainly a challenging time for the US-Canadian relationship, but there's still business to be done, and there are still amazing founders, LGBT founders, queer founders that are finding a way in this time to still build amazing companies and grow.
If you're just tuning in, this is Living Out So Fabulously, where we mix real money talk with true diplomacy. We're speaking with U.S. citizen and Canadian Trade Commissioner Maddie Morris. So you've already mentioned, or we've already brought out this idea that you're both a U.S. citizen and you work for the Canadian government. How have the recent tariffs and trade discussions impacted your job?
No, absolutely. I think I can certainly say I've never been as popular at receptions as I have been now. I think there are a lot of people that maybe they're starting to explore opportunities outside the U.S. market that they hadn't previously considered. I think if there's one thing that the tariffs have brought, it's uncertainty. And I think within that uncertainty, there also brings opportunity. I think I've been incredibly proud slash in all of my kind of Canadian partners, clients, colleagues, in watching them kind of stand up for Canadian values, to be able to focus in on what it means to be a Canadian company in an international dynamic market. And if anything, I've seen folks really try to approach the US market in a way that, whether by necessity or not, in a way that they hadn't before. And I think that that's led to a lot of new ideas, fresh ideas, and new ways of thinking about, how can Canadians, expand their international profile, whether that be here in the United States or globally.
So, can you elaborate on what you mean by investing outside of the US a little bit more? So, are you seeing more investing dollars leaving the US and going to Canada more specifically and maybe other countries generally?
Yeah, I think you're having a real moment where Canadians are looking internally in Canada, perhaps looking at the U.S. market slightly less. You look at reports even just from tourism dollars from Canadian citizens traveling to cities such as Las Vegas, Palm Springs. You have people that are looking inward and creating their own space and ecosystem in Canada, which, as someone that gets to work for Canada, it's incredibly dynamic to see the amount of growth that's happening, particularly with early stage companies. But then also recognizing that many of these companies too are looking for capital from the U.S. market, despite recent tariff conversations. And so there is still that interest there as well. And so for me, we're seeing more capital inflows into Canada from U.S. investors. We are seeing a real interest in terms of an uptick in people that are interested in founders visas or interested in immigrating to Canada through established processes, especially those LGBT entrepreneurs. I work closely with a Canadian LGBT focused venture fund, and they're seeing incredible uptick. In the over 100%, over 500% of U.S. founders that are interested in getting investment from Canada and moving their companies to Canada. I think there are people that they look at Canada, and I feel as an American working for Canada that has been put in this moment that says, "What are your values? What do you care about?" And many countries around the world are asking themselves that question right now, this year. And time again, I have personally found that Canada has said, we do believe in inclusivity. We do believe in diversity. That is what it means to be Canadian. And I think because of that, we're seeing a ton of influx of interest, of dollars, et cetera, from, especially queer founders of startups that are looking to say, where is a place that I want to grow, that I want to grow my business, that I could maybe one day see myself living there. And where is there opportunity for that ecosystem to grow a startup while maintaining US ties, not being that far away. And Canada has become kind of one of the big options.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate you sharing that, but there's one thing I would like to go back to. John and I regularly watch a channel on YouTube called Guard the Leaf, which is interesting because it's something that started, I think, less than 6 months ago. But a lot of the content that this person is putting out focuses on the ties between Canada and the United States and things like the fact that Canadian tourists, you even mentioned this, a lot fewer Canadian tourists are going to the United States. And so I'm just wondering a little bit about that. What will it take, do you think, for the Canadian tourists to say, okay, we'll come back? Or maybe the individuals who have a home in the United States, and we know that a number of them are looking at selling their homes and leaving the their residency in the United States, or even part-time residency in the United States. What do you think may reverse that tide?
That's a great question, and I think maybe I've been a little bit political in some of my answers, but certainly to this question, I think I can candidly say, you know, Canadians are upset. They're disappointed. I've heard at least one Canadian colleague, use the phrase, "I thought we were friends," and so there really are these incredibly strong feelings about policies towards Canada on behalf of just regular, everyday Canadian citizens. And I think those folks are rightful in those feelings as folks that have felt targeted, have felt hurt. It is something that um, Canada is here as a friend to the United States. We have been a long time. These tariffs came after a current tariff free trade USMCA environment that was negotiated with the Trump administration. Um, we then, when faced with these tariffs, were met with kind of the economic issues, border issues such as fentanyl, border security. Canada went out of its way to change its fentanyl policy, to work with the U.S. government to increase our investment in the Canadian Border Services Agency. Canada has, even in the midst of this, has remained a true friend to the United States and has done everything that we can to maintain this relationship of the North American free trade that has really led to prosperity for all countries here in North America. And so, I guess to specifically answer your question, I think it will take time. I think people feel hurt. I think people are really focused on building the Canadian economy from within Canada. Um, and I can't speak for every single individual Canadian, but certainly the Canadian government at a much higher level than me is having conversations to this day on how we can continue to move forward. We look forward to continued USMCA conversations next year, which is when it was set to renew. And we are still here. We are still Canada. We are a sovereign nation, and we will do what we have to move forward.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I do think it's interesting because one of the things that we have seen is there has been at the local level. So for example, from Las Vegas, we've seen this, and parts of Florida, we've seen this, where there are delegations going to Canada and saying, please come back. Please come back. We need you. We want you here. We love the fact that you come here. So why don't
We vote differently next time.
yeah. Maybe we're going to just pause for a moment here. We'll be right back after a quick break. Welcome back to Living Not So Fabulously. We're back talking with Canadian Trade Commissioner Maddie Morris. So, Maddie, we've talked a lot about your job and the current environment of trade. Let's switch over to talking a little bit about your personal financial journey. You shared with us that some of your early memories of investing, and so I'm wondering if you could share some of that with our audience here. What was it like investing early on in life, interacting with money, and maybe share some of your mistakes and wins? Because when we interact with money, we all have mistakes and wins.
I was gonna say, I certainly have made many a mistake when it comes to money. And I actually feel privileged to have made those mistakes, and privileged to have made those mistakes, I think, earlier on than a lot of folks would have. I had summer jobs in high school, and I saved up money. And my dad worked at a small credit union in rural South Carolina. As mentioned, I am an American. And I got the first advice I ever got, in high school was invest in what you know. My dad worked at a credit union, so I said, well, I know banks. And so, this is early 2008. And I put multiple summers worth of I put multiple summers worth of my savings into Wachovia, into Wells Fargo, into some other organizations and companies that don't exist anymore. And I think at the lowest point, I had lost 85% of everything I had saved up.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Oh, just
I was gonna say, if anyone's heard of 2008, I felt that. But I feel like I'm very privileged to have learned that in the relative safety and comfort of being a high schooler. Having learned that lesson early, having learned to really focus more on just a little quip that you read on an article or a friend tells you. I learned the researching the fundamentals of the companies that you invest in, kind of important. I learned the importance of diversification in terms of being able to bring my dollars back from non-existence. I learned about dollar cost averaging, about not panicking, about scraping together whatever you can find whenever the value of a stock that is in an otherwise valuable company has been undervalued. And I definitely now keep cash on the reserve in case another moment like that happens, which maybe you have a lot of listeners that, maybe they started investing after 2009 and they have been in a situation the last decade or so that, it has been an easy time to make money over the last decade. And we'll see what that looks like moving forward.
So, what has that success allowed you to do in your life?
Well, honestly, but I have to say everything. Not to get sentimental, but I really feel like it's given me my life, especially my life as a transgender woman. If I look at, I think those four big picks. The first one, Nvidia, actually helped me. The average cost of transition out of pocket, outside of healthcare and insurance, and outside of recent policy changes around healthcare and insurance at the best of times over the last 10 years, over 200,000 US dollars. And so NVIDIA is, I can remember it to this day, that win helped me to be able to afford some major gender affirming care and related expenses with transitioning. And so I credit NVIDIA for that. Palantir, I was able to afford a car. At the time, I didn't have a car. And then D-Wave, I was able to afford an apartment. And I was able to furnish the apartment, mostly IKEA, but I was able to furnish the apartment. And then I look at Rocket Lab, and it's enabling me to consider buying my first investment property or potential future property for me, likely outside of the United States. And so when I think about my investment journey, I look at how it's impacted my life. I don't think I would not I know I would not be here without I guess the self direction. Maybe I'd normally call it luck, but I suppose that's not the thing that most people would say on a finance podcast. And I think it's what's giving me the opportunity to, I guess, move forward to feel secure in the future. And, my ultimate dream to kind of give back to other people in my community that perhaps they haven't had the same success or luck that I have.
Yeah, I'm curious to ask. This is maybe a polarizing question a bit because there's many in the LGBTQ plus community who consider themselves anti-capitalist, and there's a growing sentiment of anti-capitalism in the United States. A recent report showed, and I'm curious about your thoughts of investing in Palantir and Peter Thiel's company, being a transgender woman, and how you sort of square how that helps you actually go through the transition process, maybe.
No, 100%. And, certainly, I think using your dollars and making your investments in a way that are, kind to yourself, kind to your community is the most important thing. I think there is a certain level of privilege that comes with that conversation as well on where do you put your dollars. I will say I think Palantir in particular, I exited that before this last year. I would not feel comfortable in this moment still having my dollars there. So certainly I hear you and I see you and I agree with you there. But I think it's also important to note, as a transgender woman, I think I've seen various stats, but between 30 and 50% of trans women in the United States have had to rely on sex work just to get by. We are folks that we have to take advantage of the opportunities we have, of the dollars we have, in whatever way that we can to try and make that ourselves feel safe. To honestly, I don't want to use the word survive because obviously as a government worker in my day job, I'm incredibly privileged, and I recognize that. But I think it is important to carry on that message of you have a lot of LGBT folks, QIA plus, 2S, if we're talking from the Canadian perspective, that are really they're wondering about tomorrow. They're wondering about next week. They're just trying to get to this point where, to be frank, they feel safe. And while I have had privilege, I can certainly understand what it means to give up, to leave homes, to leave your life, to try and get to a place where you feel like you can be safe and you can be yourself.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I think that John and I have long tried to share with the community that your money is one of your powers and that power can be useful for you in really getting or achieving the life that you want. And part of that is being your true self. So thank you, Maddie, for joining us and sharing your money stories with us.
Thank you for having me.
So our takeaway for you from this interview is to remember that money is a tool, and not a tool to play the game of who's got the most, but a tool for how to align your life with who you are and what it is you want to achieve. So 2 takeaways here. 1, invest in what you know, as Warren Buffett and now Maddie Morris always say. And 2, invest in who you are.
Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions or guest suggestions for us, just email yfpodcasts@yahooinc.com.
And if you like what you see, scan the QR code to follow Yahoo Finance Podcast for more videos and expert insights, because when you do, you'll discover the power of smart bets and bold voices. And until next time, stay fabulous.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.